Sup my dudes, Valkyrja, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the amount of confusion surrounding Kafka right now. I've seen so many builds and I want to talk about them today, and I want to talk about why you don't want to primarily focus on DPS Kafka, because I feel like there's a lot of people very confused on how Kafka works and how Kafka functions, and they're going to see her damage on release and they're going to be very upset. They're going to be very sad whenever, if you were to just do the math, you would realize that her damage really isn't all that great, but that's not where her strength lies. Her strength lies in being a driver of a DOT team, having very high speed, being able to constantly pop the DOT that's already on the enemy, because popping DOT is a very strong mechanic. It is incredibly strong, and it's going to age very well, because as we get more really strong DOT DPS, preferably event limited 5-stars that's centralized around DOT damage, she's going to be very good synergistically with them. She's going to synergize really well with them. So I want to talk about the confusion today. I want to talk about everything. So the first up is effect hit rate. I've seen this discussion a lot. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't believe she needs any effect hit rate. I think enough, she's going to get enough from her traces. If you happen to get some effect hit rate in substats, she probably doesn't need it. Or she probably, if you get in substats, it's nice, but it's not something to focus. You get a little bit through the substats and you're solid, you're golden. If you don't get any through substats, it doesn't matter. It's not a giant deal. A good example of that is my Sempo. I run my Sempo at active 30% effect hit rate. He gets most of that through his traces. You can see here, effect hit rate increases by 8%. And I run an attack percent body for a hybrid build, hybrid break and attack build, because this is how I believe you should build these characters. Crit rate, crit damage is irrelevant. Those stats don't, none of those substats on this thing matters. But crit rate, crit damage is relevant. But that's how I think that you should build a lot of the DPS character, or a lot of the DPS DOT characters, other than Kafka. Kafka, you don't really want to run break effect on, because I've been testing the breaks. Lightning break, not that good. Not a very good break. You do not want break effect on Kafka. You do not want effect hit rate on Kafka. If you get a little bit through the substats, good. It just guarantees it. But running 100%, going for 100% effect hit rate, or trying to make it so you always apply your DOT, is effectively, to me personally, is like running 100% crit rate. It's like cool, but you don't need it. Like, you can miss the DOTs. It happens. It's fine when it does happen. It's if it happens consistently, then you have a problem. You should not be missing the DOTs being applied consistently. It should not be an issue. You should be perfectly fine at just 0 effect hit rate, or just running the effect hit rate you get from traces. I don't think it's that big of a deal. So with effect hit rate out of the way, I want to talk about actually building her damage. So here in the background, I use starrail station to get all these numbers. I use starrail station with all of her talents at level 10, and I compared as just pure attack Kafka versus crit rate Kafka. Now, I might be a little off in these attack numbers. I might be like maybe 500 attack off. I could be even 1,000 attack off. But I tried to compensate by lowering the crit build Kafka attack by 1,000, because you're not going to be having those attack substats or those attack sub rolls that you need to make a 70 crit rate, 150 crit damage build, which I feel like is a very damn good build. 70 crit rate, 150 crit damage is a very strong build. So I feel like those are really good relics. I feel like this is a good setup to kind of compare, because 4,000 attack versus 3,000 attack sounds about right whenever you're running crit rate versus crit damage, and then this is comparing it to a raw attack build. I just want to show you guys the kind of numbers you're going to be looking at with Kafka, and why I don't believe she's meant to be like this main damage dealer. So your DOT, you are looking at 4K attack Kafka. You're looking at 11,600 damage raw, not counting any enemy debuffs, basically not counting her own traces, not counting anything that could amplify the damage. This is just raw damage. It's still got to go through enemy defense increase or decrease. It's still got to go through a bunch of different numbers, but this is just the raw number to start things off. So you can see as the ampers go in, these numbers are going to basically spread apart even further, and the higher number will be even higher, the lower number will be even lower, and it's just kind of how it's going to go. As the ampers get pushed in, these are going to be pushed apart even further. So the 3K attack crit build is going to be 8,700 on a DOT. The normal attack is going to be 4K. The crit normal attack is going to be 4.5K. So crit actually wins out in this situation. Now the skill, her highest multiplier, which is 160% with 60% splash damage at level 10. Her skill is 6,400 on the 4K attack build, and the splash is 2,400. It's 11,200 total. With if you factor in the ultimate DOT at 75% of the DOT's value, you're looking at 19,900 total damage on the non-crit build, 4,000 attack Kafka. So then the crit build, you're looking at 7,200 damage with a splash at 2,700, assuming everything crits, 12,600 total damage, and then you factor in the 75% DOT proc of her own DOT. Once again, we're not counting ampers, not counting outside sources, we're just looking at raw numbers right now. You're looking at 19,125. Now, I want to be upfront with this, is I don't know. I think even with other outside DOT sources, DOT could still potentially win out unless you get a lot more crit damage. If you get more crit damage than 70 crit rate, 150 crit damage, then yeah, I think crit damage could win out in that situation. But then I'd be curious as to where the attack stats lying. It's going to be a bunch of questions. So now the ultimate, DOT factored in. The ultimate is a really low multiplier, is 80% of her attack. So ultimate with just a pure attack build is 3,200. DOT factored in is 14,800. The ultimate with the A2 trace does 100% of the value of the current DOT on the target. So we're going to assume that this is exactly what's going on. So then the crit, 3,600 of the DOT factored in with 12,300. Follow-up is 5,600. The crit is 6,300. Now, one thing I want to note that just popped in my head that I want to make sure I cover, I don't know if her follow-up attack counts as the exact same DOT as her ultimate. I don't know that. I have to test that. I don't know if she can double stack. If she can double stack, then that means just add 11,600 to each number. So you're looking at more like 30k in ultimate, 31.5k in ultimate, and then add 8.7k to each crit hit. So if the follow-up attack can actually stack alongside the ultimate to where you have two different DOTs applied from just Kafka alone, then these numbers do go up higher and they look a lot more respectable. But either way, these numbers look kind of for the amount of investment in. These are level 10, level 6 normals, level 10 skills, and there's a reason that these numbers do not look high. Because if we look at Starrail Station, you can see her numbers just simply are not high, period. They're just not. You can see, for example, the Caressing Moonlight here. The skill is 160% of her attack with 60% splash. This is by far her best multiplier, followed by her follow-up attack at 140%. She has very low multipliers across the board. That's just how it is. That's just how this character is, because she's not meant to be the main DPS. This is the thing a lot of people are confused on, is that she's not meant to be your main damage option in DOT. She is the driver. Because of the fact that she can pop currently applied DOT, it allows her to pair very well with very high damaging characters like Luca. Luca's going to apply a ton of damage and he's going to be able to proc it himself. Luca's going to be able to double stack bleed through a hybrid build with having break effect on physical. Physical break effect is very, very strong. He put bleed on the target like that, as well as having his own personally applied bleed DOT that caps out with attack, so it's not going to be anything crazy, but it's going to be very strong because she's going to be able to constantly pop that. As well as her ultimate at A2, her ultimate also is able to apply all DOTs currently applied on target for full value once you get it to A2. So basically, she's not meant to do damage. She is meant to be the driver for the Nihility team from here on forever. If you guys know, a good comparison again should be somebody like Sucrose. Sucrose, you can build full DPS Sucrose, but is that where most people use her? No, most people use her as a driver to try to drive elemental reactions because she's really good at proccing those elemental reactions. Kafka's really, really good at proccing the DOTs. She's going to be the main driver for the Nihility team going forward, and that's where a lot of people are going to be very upset at her personal damage and very upset at what she can actually accomplish, because she's not going to be the crazy unit people want her to be. She's not going to. She's not going to be your main damage that you can slot into a Bronya, Ting Young, Yukong team. You slot her in there like Sela and you just start doing tons of damage. Because if we compare her kits to Sela, you can see Sela absolutely clears in terms of just sheer numbers. Like, if we just turn everything to level 10 real quick, you can see Sela just clears in terms of numbers. If we just assume Sela has Resurgence active, which increases the damage of everything by 80%, the damage of Sela's attack increases by 80%. This is a 425% multiplier. This is already more than double anything Kafka has. A 220% multiplier on her skill, and then a 100% multiplier, which everybody has. But then this gets amplified even further by 80%. This is just to showcase exactly how weak Kafka is in terms of personal damage compared to other characters. So I don't believe believe that Kafka with her personal damage is the way to go. Just the numbers just don't look good enough for me for the amount of investment you're going to have to put into these characters. The numbers just don't look good enough for me to recommend this to you. Now, am I saying that you should build her some other way, go affect hit rate on your chest piece? No, you should still want to give her some personal damage, because the way the DOT team's going to work is it's going to be a very synergized team, and the fact that the more DOT you have on the target, the more DOT she can proc. Right? The more DOT she can proc, the more damage you're doing very quickly, but you're just not wanting to build her for personal damage. I just don't think that's the way to go. I think she's going to be more of a supportive character. I think she's going to be more of a driver. I just don't see her doing a ton of damage on her own. Now, I could be very wrong. The numbers could be different. Like, I don't know, maybe my math is off. Maybe it amplifies and hits multiplicative values harder than I think it does. But the way I'm looking at everything now, the way I'm seeing everything, I just don't think any type of damage build on Kafka is really the way to go, to where you want her to be the main focus, the main focal point of the damage. Like here, comparing her to Luca. Luca's a very good example to compare her to, because Luca has a bunch of stuff going on with him, and he's going to be very strong. So we have, with each hit dealing physical damage equal to 20% Luca's attack main target, dealing physical damage 80% to a single target. So we're going to ignore his normal, because his normal, it functions uniquely, but it plays into his follow-up. But then we go to his skill. His skill is 120% to a single enemy. In addition, there's a 100% base chance to inflict bleed on them, lasting for 3 turns. The 120% is much lower than Kafka's 160% on a main target, but the bleed is 24% of their max HP as physical damage. This damage will not exceed more than 338% of Luca's attack. Keep in mind that this bleed can also be placed alongside break effect bleed, so you can have 2 stacks of bleed at the same time. Very strong. And then his level 10 ultimate receives 2 stacks of fighting will with 100% base chance to increase single target enemy damage received by 20% for 3 turns. So he debuffs, as well as 330% versus Kafka's 80% of the damage to the target. This is what I mean by Kafka has very low base multipliers. Not counting her DOTs, but just the 330% versus the 80% to give you an idea of how that works. But the main thing is it receives 2 stacks of fighting will. So whenever he uses his normal with 2 stacks of fighting will, he's going to be able to use an enhanced basic. At least 2 stacks. He can get up to 4 stacks, but he can have at least 2. And whenever he uses an enhanced basic, he's going to be able to deal damage for 1 time equal to 85% of the bleed applied to the current target. Meaning, if you have the bleed from, if this should work, if it's worded right, this should work in theory. Meaning, if you have break effect bleed plus his applied DOT bleed, you can pop both using the normal attack that's going to generate a skill point from Luca. Using that normal attack, he's going to be able to proc 2 sources of bleed. Meaning Luca's going to be able to proc his own bleed. Kafka's going to proc Luca's bleed, plus apply her own shock and proc her own shock too. Kafka's going to proc both of them on ultimate. Everybody's going to be proccing their own DOTs on their turns constantly, which is why Luca is going to be such an important member of the DOT team whenever you're running it. Luca is going to be your main focal point in damage, not Kafka, because Luca is going to be applying very strong percent HP DOTs through break effect and also through his own skill. Now his own skill of course caps out at, you know, so much of his attack, but you can buff attack with Asta, you can buff attack with a bunch of different sources. But this is just something to consider. And also running Asta gives you access to Kingdom of Banditry, which is the 36% break effect piece. Our set is very strong. I made a video about that before. But anyways, this is why you don't really want to focus on Kafka's personal damage, because she's going to basically be really good and popping other characters' DOTs, very strong DOTs. And until Nihility gets really broken 5-star damage dealers, you're not really going to see Kafka's value too high until that basically occurs. So hopefully this video, I know it's kind of long, I know it's kind of long-winded, I know I've been talking a bunch, I know I misspoke a bunch, but hopefully I corrected myself on everything I misspoke. But basically, hopefully this clears up a lot of confusion and the fact that you don't really want to be building Kafka as a pure damage. Now, I know a lot of you guys will be like, so I don't want attack on my rope. I don't want effect hit rate on my rope. What do I want? Hear me out. Energy regeneration. I know I made another video on it before, but I'm going to reiterate. Kafka has a ton of avenues to generate energy. Through her traces, even at E0, she's going to generate a ton of energy. So she's already really good at this. Just make it better. Make it even better. That way she can run energy regeneration rate on the rope, because you don't want her to break, because once again, shock break, not that good. You don't want her to break. So you want to run as much energy regeneration rate on her rope as much as you can. You want to give her a bunch of energy regeneration so she ults more often, so she's able to go ahead and just pop DOTs more often through her ultimate. Ultimate regenerates energy, applies shock to all of the enemies, and then she's going to be able to constantly pop that shock through her skill, or well, at least on one target with her skill. But again, with her ultimate pops all DOTs on all enemies for full values. It's really good. So that's the video. Hopefully this made a lot of sense. Hopefully I'm not too crazy for you guys. But I just like just doing the numbers, just seeing how everything works. I just don't think that damage Kafka is the way to go. I think more so a utility-based role, a support-based role just seems good in my opinion, and pushing other characters' DOT damage as far as you can. I think that's just going to be the way she functions, and I think she's going to have a place in the future DOT team, but I think it's going to be very similar to like when Xiao first came out in Genshin in 1.3, is that Xiao did not have a team at first. He had a very rough team, and it took a very long time for a team to be built around him to the point where he was a pretty good character. But that's basically kind of where she's at. She's just waiting on future releases to be a much stronger driver for that team. But until future releases come out, you're going to be looking at a very suboptimal DOT team. Well, I mean, it's going to be optimal for the game we're given right now. But until we get those broken 5-star Nihility focused characters that just focus on DOT, don't even have to be Nihility, just broken 5-star DPSs that are really focused on DOT, until we get those, Kafka is not going to have a ton of value. That's just how her character is. Just don't see a lot of damage coming out from her personally. But then again, I'm more than willing to be wrong. If I'm wrong, cool. Then the Kafka I invested in is very strong. If I'm right, then at least I know what to expect, right? Anyways, thank you guys for watching as always. Hopefully this gives a lot of confusion and not adds to it. I don't know. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.